An establishment has garnered the authority to separate a family without knowing 100% of the facts.
You heard the judge give you a definition of medical negligence. I just kind of paraphrased it. But the point I'm making to you is that the evidence will ultimately show that these doctors and these nurses and this hospital staff acted reasonably and prudently to treat a difficult and challenging case they were presented with, and they did it consistently over 3 months. They don't have to be right under the law. All they have to be is reasonable.
Hang on. Say that one more time.
They don't have to be right under the law. All they have to be is reasonable.
So before we get started, I'm going to paraphrase this particular law that covers this subject, but I'll pull it up on the screen. You can pause it if you want. Florida law, chapter 39, section 395, essentially says that any person in charge of a hospital can detain a person with or without consent if they feel the person is in danger. They do have to immediately notify authorities to start the investigation, and the courts have to be involved if the holdings will last more than 24 hours. The department will avoid placement of a child into an institution whenever possible. And to dive deeper about what we're going to talk about, I came across this blog. It's going to be linked down in the description below. And there was a particular paragraph in there I thought was important. Morality may, with time, have been distinguished with laws, but it remains an integral part of legal development. Laws essentially involve certain basic principles, such as the principle of fairness and equality, and the principles are derived from ethics and morals. So the attorney said, they don't have to be right under the law. They just have to be reasonable. My question to you is, one, do you think they were reasonable in their actions holding this individual 90-something days? Do you think it's okay for the hospital to make things like this happen without knowing for sure they're right? And I also want to know, what role do you think morality should play in the court system and with the writing of our laws? And if an open conversation is something you prefer, then this is the place for you. Welcome to The Point, so let's talk about it. So yes, I played the clip, you heard the attorney. They don't have to be right legally. They just have to be acting reasonably under the law. But we also heard this blog, and it takes place in discussions through all law schools in their ethics portion and things of that nature, where they say, hey, look, morality versus legality. Where's the line? What are we doing? So for those of you who are very familiar with this particular case, who saw this special on TV, was the hospital right? Is it okay for them, based off possible guesses or hunches or actual evidence, to detain and separate families without for sure knowing what happened? That is the question here. It seems to me we have garnered a lot of authority to certain institutions, and it's only until we have a major incident that we step back and say, okay, hang on, we need to adjust this. I'm sure the individuals that have written this law had the best intentions at heart. They may have came across a scenario in a hospital where an individual was clearly being mistreated, but the hospital and the authorities had no legal right or precedence to separate the individuals, and possibly something bad happened. But it always seems like when we write these laws, they're overwritten. They're painted broadly. So how do we address this as a society? Now, we can't simply just say, hey, look, morality has no place in our judicial system. It has every place in our judicial system. We can all agree universally across every single country that watches this channel. Yeah, I'm talking to you, Canada, Great Britain, Greece, Netherlands, Turkey. I know it, Australia. I ain't forgetting about you either. We all have laws. We know that we can't steal. Morally, it's wrong. So we have laws for it. If you steal, It's illegal. You'll get in trouble. And we know that just because we have a disagreement, major or minor, we don't have the right to just simply unalive somebody over that disagreement. We can all agree that taking people's lives is immoral. So we have laws against it. But here we are with this situation. A family was separated. And it was clearly traumatic for them. It was traumatizing for the victim. It was traumatizing for the family. And I don't want to right off the bat sit here and rip the staff of the hospital. Let's just be upfront and honest. We like to point the finger at the individuals in these types of scenarios, but we all have to understand that everybody has a boss, and every business and establishment has a policy that governs them. And if these people want food and they want water and they want power, they have to follow these policies. So I'm not going to rail against the individual doctors and nurses that treated this individual, but I do want to focus on that particular statement from the attorney. Why did he say that? Why is he saying under the law we don't have to be right? We just have to be reasonable. He would go on to say, of course, I think you'll find that we were right, but he threw that in there. And lawyers just don't say things to say things. That's a CYA statement. And if you don't know what a CYA statement is, you'll have to look it up. But that's a CYA statement. He's literally telling these people, hey, look, whether you agree or disagree with what we did, we're legally right, and you have to abide by the law as it is written. And it may be a time in this country where we readdress some of these laws, because this family was eventually reunited after the tragedy, of course, but they were reunited. And that leads me to at least initially believe on the surface of it that they couldn't find any wrongdoing. Now, we're not diving into what happened specifically with this particular case. But does the hospital have the right to, on a whim, separate a family without knowing for sure that there is harm going on? We are not doctors. We go to doctors for advice. We don't know everything about what to do and what not to do when treating our health. So we rely on the medical professionals to give us that guidance. And this whole situation may simply be a situation where the family received treatment by a medical professional and assumed that that treatment was okay, it was safe, and then when they proceeded to seek further treatment, had no clue that what they were doing may potentially be harmful. We'll find that out as this particular hearing goes on, and the jury will make the decision on if the hospital was right or wrong. But if the family was reunited, we can assume they found no wrongdoing. So was this right? Where are we as our own society at morally, to where we can all say, all right, we're just going to trust the word of these people, whatever they say goes, and we have no leg to stand on when they say otherwise. So me and you, if we would have made this claim in this statement to protective services or whatever entity covers your area, we would have not received the immediate validation that these individuals received, because they assume we don't know all the ins and outs of what to look for. But they would assume that teachers would know. They would assume that doctors would know, EMTs, police. Our states assume that they know what to look for, they know what they're talking about, so if they make the statement that this needs to be looked at, then it needs to be looked at immediately. And we have given a lot of authority to these individuals. And because there is this blanket authority to always assume that they are always at least initially right, we now have a situation like this. And I got to say, at least on the initial opening arguments, legally or not, this was morally wrong. It should be morally wrong to separate a family. It should be morally wrong to separate anyone from their mother. And it clearly affected her. I mean, if this family is going to a hospital to seek treatment for their child, how are they trying to cause their child harm? It isn't like they went to a veterinarian and said, hey, give me this dose. They went to a hospital. And most people who know they're doing wrong don't go to facilities where they know they can get in trouble for doing that. I mean, my goodness, if I go steal $500,000 and then immediately go to a bank and deposit and open an account for $500,000, I'm clearly going to get caught. So I wouldn't go to a bank. I'd find a tree, make small purchase. Not getting into all that, but y'all get my point. When people are doing wrong, they don't actively go to and seek out areas where they know they will get caught. So we have to readdress this. This does deserve some talking about. This does deserve our attention. And it's not necessarily being the focus from what I'm seeing on this particular case. An establishment has garnered the authority to separate a family without knowing 100% of the facts, at least on the optics of it. Now, the legalities of it will be determined by that jury. But we have all, regardless of where you are at on who's right or who's wrong, can agree that morally speaking, nobody should just up front have the authority without the investigation to separate families. Now, sure, it would be a thing if you had noticed some type of marks or indicators that something bad was going on, but for the family to go up there and seek a medical opinion to help their daughter, how are they also trying to harm their daughter? I have to know. Let me know. Something on the surface of this and something in this situation isn't passing the sniff test for me. And I gotta know from y'all, is it passing the sniff test for y'all? The attorney made the statement. Whether they were right or wrong, it was legal. How can that be okay? How is that all right? How is this acceptable in our society? Because if I go do something, if I go separate a family based off my own hunches without knowing all the facts, I'm getting carted off to jail. So these rules don't apply for everybody. And we grant more authority to certain individuals because we're supposed to trust their judgment. And it does look like the initial judgment here was wrong. And it also looks like every state should be readdressing this and fine-tuning this if this particular statement is in law in their state before this happens again. Because we shouldn't have a country where somebody's initial hunches are all it takes to separate people without evidence, without knowing all the facts. So we'll find out if the family actually made statements that they were aware something like this was dangerous. We'll find out if the hospital even asked the questions. How do you know about this? Where were you prescribed this? Where did y'all go for this treatment? All this will come to light. I'm not going to act like I sat there and have followed this and I am in tune with every individual detail. But I can say, during those opening statements, for an attorney to tell a jury whether they were wrong, they were legally right and reasonable, that to me should be a huge red flag to somebody. So let me know down in the comments below what you think. Let me know down in the comments below if you're following this case. And if there's something I missed about this in my particular statements, please feel free to correct me down below. Other than that, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you being here. Y'all stay safe, and I'll catch you in the next one.